huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, for all of those listening. It is Monday, March 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern when this new episode of We Get It will release, and we hope you are enjoying whatever part of the day you are at on this wonderful Monday, or maybe later in the week. I have a special guest today. This whole season has been fantastic so far. We are in our 8th episode. I have a guest that is new to sort of me in terms of we've just introduced ourselves recently to each other. I have Heather Brown, YACCtivist Yacker from Smith Falls, Ontario, has a lot of really incredible stuff to say about her experience, her journey, and what this YACCtivist program and being involved with YAC really means to her. I think she has a lot of really unique aspects of her diagnosis and experience and a lot of cool goals that we kind of talked on before the call that I'd love to get into. So first and foremost, Heather, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. And I think just to keep things simple, we'll introduce a question that I've asked everyone so far just to get you to know the audience and vice versa. So I'll start with this. What are 3 words you would use to describe yourself?
It's a good question. I'm very empathetic towards others. I try to be engaged with many, many things, always on the go, and connecting with others. And I'm very just caring. I know, I guess caring and empathetic are very similar, but just that's very much part of me, being kind, being open, and being engaged.
Absolutely. I think I can pick up on all of those vibes early on already. So that seems very accurate. And so I know you are new with the YACCtivist program, but for some individuals who may not know you or your story, can you tell us a little bit about your cancer story with papillary thyroid cancer and beyond?
Totally. So I had my diagnosis come in July 2017, and I found YAC in January 2018. So I was a couple months into my diagnosis. But what had happened was I was just really not feeling well. I was a busy mom and wife. I had 2 kids at the time. They were 8 and 6. And I was working full time for a national charity. So my job demanded a lot from me. And I was always that staff that wanted to give that 100% at work and then 100% at home. I was also volunteering with the kids' parent council, as well as I'm a Girl Guide leader. So I was full-fledged into leading a couple different units at that time too. So life was really busy and I was really tired, not feeling great, had a hard time thinking things through. So I had a lot of like that brain fog type feeling. I was very heated, like I was very, very hot, felt hot, cold, sweating was going on. And I was like, something's not right. And so I had chatted with my family doctor, who I absolutely love. She was just the best doctor I've ever had. And she took my concerns and was like, okay, let's try to figure this out. So it took a couple of months to kind of narrow in things. We did some blood work. My thyroid blood work had come back fine. We still couldn't figure out why. A couple of years before, I'd been diagnosed with a genetic condition. So it's juvenile polyposis syndrome. So I have polyps that can grow in my GI tract. And so I do have to have normal procedures to help, proactively remove any polyps that I get. And so she thought, well, maybe that's something in your vocal cords, because I wasn't feeling good. I was losing my voice. So I went and saw an ENT. The ENT didn't see anything there, but sent me for an MRI. So after the MRI, they did find 2 nodules. And then they sent me to the non-cancer clinic for follow-up. But because it was so busy, they sent me a letter that said, we're so backed up with the non-cancer clinic, we're going to send you to the cancer clinic, but it doesn't mean you have cancer. And I was like, okay. All while this was going on, all these different tests and trying to figure it out with my family doctor, I thought stress was a big part of what was causing me to not feel well. So I did end up leaving my position of 9 years, and I loved the program I was working for, but I just felt like I needed something different. And then I ended up finding a wonderful job as well, working with helping students to apply to study in Australia. So what a great opportunity that was. Oh, yeah. So a couple weeks into my new job with my new work, and I had my appointment with a specialist. So this was a new specialist. And I kind of thought, oh, it'll only take like an hour. I'll drive there to Kingston, drive back to work. It'll be great. And I ended up being there for about 3 hours. I had an ultrasound, I had a fine needle uh, aspiration, so like a biopsy done, not expecting any of this, just because I had so many symptoms going on, they could really tell something was not right. And I remember talking with the doctor. He was like, I think you're going to need to come back in about 2 weeks. We'll have the biopsy results back then. And I was so worried about my new employer and taking more time off that I wasn't comfortable coming back to have that appointment. So I really advocated to say, look, I need it as a phone call. I just can't take more time off. Also, I was a little naive, I think, expecting that it wouldn't necessarily be a positive biopsy result.
Yeah.
So, a week and a half later, I got a phone call earlier than I thought I would, but I missed it. I was in a staff meeting. So I tried calling the office back, and it took about a day or so, day and a half, until I connected. I think it was the secretary, who was lovely. And she said they were sending me to a surgeon for malignancy concerns. And I was like, what is happening? And I was also at work when I had that phone call.
Yeah.
So the second I got off the phone, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm pretty sure I screamed quite loudly. And then one of my managers came to check on me and realized I wasn't okay and gave me support right then and there. But it was kind of a crazy few months with all these things going on. And we had family cancer experiences as well in the mix of the past couple of years before my diagnosis and going on during. So there was a lot of emotion and a lot of chaos at the time of when I was diagnosed and going through things. I ended up having a total thyroidectomy. So I had my thyroid removed in like about a month later after my diagnosis in Kingston, and I have great surgeon. And then I had a radioactive iodine treatment as well in January 2018. So I had to isolate alone after drinking the nuclear solution. So I isolated for 5 days at that time to help kill off any remnant thyroid cells that might be in my body. So it was quite intense. And then I, of course, started my thyroid replacement medicine and calcium and vitamin D, because my body was just all out of whack with that stuff too.
Yeah, of course. That's a lot to take in. And I know we chatted a little prior to recording too, that there was all of this going on around you, almost like little dark clouds and a lot of just kind of stress going on at once. So when you obviously are going through that and then the radioactive iodine treatment, and that's kind of when you, I guess, first kind of interacted with YACC, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But with all of that going on, work, school, not work, but excuse me, work, not school, but with kids and all the family stuff going on, was there ever any intention that when you were diagnosed or ever after that you wanted to kind of interact with the cancer community at all? Or did you want to more leave all the cancer behind? Like, what was your mindset on that aspect of things?
Yeah, I was really craving connection, any kind of connection. I'm in a small town here of Smith Falls, and so it's about 9,000 people, and we're between Ottawa and Kingston, kind of about an hour to each of those cities from here. And I didn't really know anyone else other than older people in the community that may have had cancer. So I was really looking for someone to talk to. I felt very isolated, even though I had great people supporting me. Trying to understand what was going on with my own situation was hard. And so I was really looking for that. So I was so happy to like find YACC and find a way to connect, because I was definitely feeling like that was something I needed to do. So I definitely, right from the beginning, the second I found YACC, I was like, yeah, this is great. And I got to find a way to get involved.
Yeah. And it's funny because I was reading too that like I felt very similar to you. My first event was the big cancer hookup in January in Toronto. And I was seeing that your first event, I think, was similar in Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it
In
was.
January. Yeah. And so what I remember is kind of going through that, watching it, feeling inspired. And then the group that I went out with just grabbed a few drinks and some food afterwards. And they were like, you have to go to this survivor conference, which at the time it was in person. And I was like, it's too early for me. Like I just met everybody, but then I was like, you know what, let's go. And I kind of just hit the ground running with YACC and the cancer community. So I know you touched on it a little bit, but were you hesitant from when you first started to kind of get more involved or get your feet wet, or were you just ready to jump in to either help or advocate or at least be involved?
Yeah, I started with just connecting through Local Life Ottawa and the Facebook group as well. I found that those were the best things for me to do at the time because of life being busy and because I don't live in Ottawa. It's about an hour to get into Ottawa, then the activity, and then back home. And my other volunteer commitments to Girl Guide keeps a lot of my time busy, which I love. So with those kinds of things, I wasn't quite ready to like tackle doing a survivor conference or a retreat or anything like that, although I thought they were pretty awesome. So I started with Local Life Ottawa, and I've gone to many activities, and then I've also done some of the virtual conferences and some of the chats since the pandemic started. Those have been great, but I felt like I was ready at this point in 2021 to start to branch out and get more involved. So I did some social committee for the last virtual conference, which I love doing, and the activist thing just felt like it was the right time for me. I had also registered right before the pandemic to go to the 2020 conference in person, but that got postponed because of the pandemic. So hopefully one day I'll make it to a survivor conference in person, because I'm definitely ready for that now. But my kids are a little older, which is a little easier for me to coordinate things on my end. So that was part of it too. I probably would have jumped in if maybe my kids had been a bit older at the time.
Yeah. That's definitely something I want to get into in a little bit as well. And with the pandemic, I know it kind of threw everybody for a loop. And I'm glad that YAC was able to adjust and transfer a lot of things online, because I think there was still a lot of need for people, even if it's virtual, to communicate and find some sort of community. And including this YACCtivist program, which I definitely want to discuss in a second. But we were even talking before we started recording, and I could genuinely tell some of the things that you're really passionate about. So that's kind of what I'm curious about, Heather, is like, what are a few aspects of like the cancer world or journey or community that you find are really passionate, or what are some things that you'd like to advocate for? Like the idea of, is it reducing isolation, finances, fear of recurrence? Like, what are the big things for you?
Absolutely. So I definitely want to help people feel less isolated. Being from a small community, I don't, and maybe because of the type of cancer experience I had, is different than others. I didn't have chemo or typical radiation type treatments. I didn't feel very connected other than my two people at the cancer care. I didn't really feel like I had other aspects to like access for help and that kind of thing. And I lived about an hour and a bit away from my cancer center too. So I would love to see opportunities to help reduce the isolation in whatever ways we can. I think YAC has done great over the pandemic with the chats and all the ways that they were engaging with virtual conferences. And that was really helpful, especially to me when I can't always get into the city to do things. I had such great times at those events that YAC has held, and learned so many more pieces of information or resources that I can access, even though I'm not in a city. So I found that was really great. Another thing I really hope to touch on is the parenting piece, parenting and cancer. Every parent's going to have a different experience based on the age of their kids, the type of kids, and the family dynamic. But that is something that I'd love to see a little bit more discussed through our YACCtivist program, because I think there is a need there that we can definitely help to give some guidance and support in. And then I'd also love, because I got my diagnosis while I was at work and I had a really supportive workplace, I'm very fortunate. And I know not everyone has that kind of experience with their workplace. I know a lot of people struggle with getting supports from their workplace when they're going through their cancer experience. And I'd love to see if there's ways just to give more support or guidance to some workplaces. And I'd love to see if there's anything that we can explore that way.
I think that's awesome. It's funny because that's one thing that I think gets not swept under the rug, but it's not talked about as much when you think about all the aspects of cancer. Like, 'cause obviously some people take their time off work, some people decide to go through work or school throughout. But when you look at it from the opposite perspective of the work or the school, they don't really get what's going on, and so they might not be able to provide the resources that they do, or they might not be able to handle it the way that we hope that they do because of that lack of or the disparity of knowledge. So I think that's a really big piece that not a lot of people advocate for. So I'm excited to see if we can do anything on that side of
Totally. And
things.
like,
Yeah.
I remember at one of the virtual conferences from YAC, there was a work in cancer session. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Right after I emailed my boss and was like, hey, this is a resource you guys can use. I can use too. It gives a lot of context and support. And that's something I really had wanted right from the beginning. And so that was really great when I had that at the YAC virtual conference. I think it was in 2020. And like, that was really helpful. We are a small business of like 20-ish employees. So this was not something they've ever had to deal with. And, you know, they did a really great job, and they helped me celebrate when I got my no evidence of disease. They sent me for a pedicure and a manicure and a massage to make me take the time to celebrate that, because I was like, yeah, it's fine, I'm at work, you know, and they're like, no, you know, you need to celebrate that. That's big. And I was like, well, I know it's big, but I'm like, just go.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I'm the same way. I feel very similar to you when we were talking about like just like you're focused on work, and you obviously do other volunteer roles outside of YAC, like you were saying. So sometimes it's nice for someone to say, no, stop working, stop, just go. And you're like, all right, maybe I do deserve this. Maybe I should celebrate this more than I'm giving it
it was
credit
lovely.
for.
Yep, totally.
Awesome.
And to be honest, I'm that last person in the office. They're always like, take Heather with you. Make sure she leaves the office. I get that all the time.
All the time. And I know it's a new role, and mainly for you, I know this is kind of the second go around with the Activist program, and a lot of us activists are within a new context of it. But although it's still in its early stages of this second go around, what did you or do you really find the most intriguing part about the activist role? Is it like the writing aspect? Is it like being able to share your story? Like, what do you find most intriguing about it?
Well, it's helping me to grow,
Nice.
and in ways that I hadn't really realized I needed to. So when I was thinking about applying, I was like, oh, I'd really like to share my story. And so that's a big part of it. But also part of it is making time for me to do these blogs and these speaking opportunities when they come up, is to like reflect on my experience. And I don't think I gave myself full like grace to do that in that time when I was diagnosed, and in those couple of years after. I think I was in the survival mode, which many people tend to be in, where I was just running for all the things we were doing as parents and like employees, and all those hats I wear. I didn't really let myself think about what I had experienced and what that meant and how to move forward with it. So I think that the activist role is helping me to start writing things, because I'm not a writer by nature. I don't journal, and it's a really good exercise for me to like get more into a routine of writing what I'm feeling down, and putting that on paper. I don't mind writing, I just don't have a routine of doing it, and that's the hardest part for me, is making that routine. But it's been
Yeah.
really good so far to like put a lot of thoughts into paper.
Totally. Yeah, I think it offers a lot of options. And I've always really liked the creative writing side of things. And even if you don't end up publishing, I think there's a lot of therapeutic nature to writing, to getting your thoughts out that people don't really realize. So even if it doesn't go out, I think it's nice to be able to write all these ideas down, and then maybe one day someone might benefit from just reading them or getting to understand them. So
Exactly. And the insight that I'm getting for myself when I'm writing it, I'm like, oh, I didn't
yeah,
realize I was like that bothered by something, or I didn't realize how important that was in the grand scheme of things to me. And so it's giving me some perspective too. So it's been a really great experience so far, and I'm really excited to continue.
totally. Absolutely. And one thing that you touched on that is really important to you, obviously outside of the cancer experience, but about advocating for, is being a parent when you're going through a cancer diagnosis. And you've mentioned your children prior to when we were chatting, and you brought them up once or twice during this conversation. And if you're comfortable sharing, because you've had a very unique experience in that we were chatting about how when you were diagnosed, a lot of your family, whether be right before, during, or after, were also going through it. And so I think your kids got a chance to see a lot of the cancer side at once, which I don't think a lot of people, let alone younger children, do experience. So how did your diagnosis and your experience with cancer really affect them and just your family in general, if you don't mind sharing that?
Yeah, cancer had a big part of my kids' life when they were younger, just because I had my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, I had my mom's boyfriend. There was a lot of really close people in our life, as well as some family friends. Their children had been diagnosed too. So all of these things had already taken place before I got my diagnosis. So for them, it was almost not regular, but when I got diagnosed, it almost wasn't a shock to them. I kind of was a little afraid that they'd be worried that everyone was going to have an
Yeah.
experience like this, because it just felt so, I guess they were a little sensitized to it.
Right.
I remember when I told my kids, and I didn't even know how to do this, and I just told them. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell them. They'll probably like have questions, and that's fine. I remember telling them like a day or two after I was diagnosed. I was heading away with my family to do a girls' weekend, so I was really excited, and I definitely needed that girls' weekend more
Yeah.
than I'd ever had. And they were sitting at a little kids' table in the living room, and I said, "Hey, Mom's got to tell you something." And they were 6 and 8 at the time, and I said, "Mom's got cancer, but I'm okay." And I remember my son, who was 8 at the time, he just looked at me and he's like, "Is cancer contagious?" And I said, "No, honey, it's not." And he was like, "Okay." And then went carrying on whatever he was doing at the table. And I remember my daughter, she was 6. She really didn't fully understand anything either, but just kind of thought, "Oh, well, it's not contagious." And off they went.
Yeah.
They've had lots of questions and they've been concerned through the process. But I think because they had seen other members go through experiences, they it wasn't as maybe traumatizing to them as it could have been, had it been just their first experience with a cancer diagnosis of someone around them. But they also had two different types of cancer experiences. The
Mhm.
family members that had it, they had chemo, radiation, they had very different cancers and different experiences than I did with my thyroid cancer. So, what they were maybe used to seeing in a cancer patient was a little different from mine. So,
Yeah.
so that kind of was interesting to navigate because I didn't look sick. But I was exhausted. I would fall asleep after dinner. I had no energy to help with homework. All those kinds of things were the struggle, but like I didn't look sick. I never lost my hair because I didn't do chemo, all those kinds of things. So I think that made it a little confusing for them because I didn't look the same way as other people had with cancer for like a kid's perspective. So it definitely was very interesting. I probably wish I could have better supported them in that first discussion, but I hadn't really understood the gravity of it either, I don't think,
Yeah.
and was processing it myself. So there's always ways of looking back. But I'd love to have more conversations about parenting and how to support parents and support children, and find a good source of resources to offer parents so that when that does happen to others, they don't maybe have to worry. They have they'll have to worry, of course, but they have guidance there that they can find a resource to help them tell that to their kids, or to know that that's a normal feeling when you're a parent and you're experiencing these things. That's what I'm hoping to be able to help, as a activist, and make a little bit of a mark there.
Yeah, I think, and you've mentioned how you've already had some discussions with some of the other ladies in the activist program to kind of develop something like that. I think it's super useful. There's so many people in our community that have children, or even maybe as a child, and how you communicate it with your family or your parents. I think it goes both ways. Um, so being, and it is very unique that your family really within a few years has gone through so many different cancer experiences. So now that your kids are a little older and probably understand a little bit more about what's going on, how much do you or have you shared with them about this journey? Like, is it just something that's very open discussion, and have they kind of been more involved in it? Or is it just now kind of something that is in the past? I'm just kind of curious about how that goes now.
Yeah, we were pretty open. With
Mhm.
when they were going through seeing my in-laws with their cancer journey. My in-laws were our care providers for the kids when before school and after school, and when they were babies. They was very helpful. And so they have a really close relationship with them. So they were seeing a lot there, right from the get-go. So we've always been quite open. We did end up losing my father-in-law and my mom's boyfriend as well, both to their cancer journeys, one in 2017, a couple months after my diagnosis, and then one in 2019. And so those were really hard for us And so that was pretty tough, but we've been open to answer their questions. They know when I'm not feeling great or when I'm feeling just run down. They understand why I take medications, to some extent. Now that they're, almost 11 and 12, they do read things. So I almost need to be a little more open with them. They're very, very quick to catch on to things. So I'd rather them know and me explain it than them wondering. And I always let them know that they can ask me questions if they have them. And that, this is just part of the journey too, and that it's normal for them to have those questions and want to ask, and that they can always do that.
Yeah, I think, and everyone has their own approach to it, whether it's just your family members in general, or if you have kids, how you describe it. But I think that is a great approach to take, is share it and just say, like, if you have questions, let me know. Because like you said, this day and age, I mean, we find things out like from every different type of resources. So I think it's best to be able to come from someone who's going through it and have that open discussion. So I'm glad to hear. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
And just not necessarily involved with parenting specifically, but I always wonder, like for me, it's just, there's certain aspects of my journey that maybe would be nice to have changed. So looking back, and I know we're never really out of cancer forever, at least the journey, but is there anything that you would have considered doing differently when you were first diagnosed, or for the first year or so of your journey, now having that retrospective view, like anything you may have changed or handled a little differently at all?
Well, I've gotten better since the pandemic of taking more time to relax. I kind of forced everybody to do that in some ways. There was a lot of things that it put on hold. And so, I probably should have taken more time in that first year to rest more, to reflect more. Those are things I definitely probably would have loved to have done more of and allowed myself to. I didn't feel like I needed to. I felt like I had all these other things that were important to me that I wanted to press on. I didn't want to stop guiding. I didn't want to stop work. I didn't want to stop, doing what I need to do around the house. Although my husband really, he did so much, probably even more than I even realized he was doing, to make that easier on me. But I really wish I had given myself more time and, probably just been a little bit more open with my husband too. Sometimes I think I just tried to not worry him about things, and that's always not the fair side of things. I probably could have been a little bit more open to how I was feeling with him.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's a fair point for sure. And I mean, although there's never really one piece of advice that is the be all end all for people who are diagnosed or going through it, everyone has their own experiences and is unique. But would there be maybe one thing or one or two things that you would want to share with somebody who might be talking to you and sharing that they're first diagnosed or the newly diagnosed? Any piece of advice for someone like that?
Yeah, like my thing was I wasn't alone. I found a community in YAC, and that was so reassuring. We can't take away the chaos and the pain and the wildness that a cancer diagnosis brings, but you can bring some comfort in through YAC. So I hope that you know that there are supporters. We're only just a message away through the Facebook community. We're eager to help on those bad days, and that's kind of what I love about YAC.
Yeah, I think too, I just based on the conversation we've had, I think it's even, and I feel a lot like this too, is a lot of people are go, go, go. And when you get hit with a diagnosis, it obviously disrupts your life, depending on the type of person that you are. But I think it is important to take the lesson of, like, even though COVID kind of, like you said, it forced us into transition into maybe more of a laid back phase, but you need to take the time for yourself and realize that your body, your mind, all of that needs to take its own time to be away and to relax, so that you can give everything you have towards your health and your family and everyone around you. I think that's just as important, but I think there's a bunch of good points that are to be made with that conversation there. 100%.
Totally. And I'm working on finding a better balance for me. It doesn't mean stopping everything, because that doesn't feel right to me, but it's saying no to some things or doing some things in a better way to feel a little more balanced in my schedule. And I'm also really trying to work on some nutritional goals too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Awesome. So on nutrition, great transition. I ask everybody who jumps on, totally unrelated to cancer, but a great way to kind of end things off. Heather, what are your top 3 favorite fruits?
That's a hard question.
know.
I have a sweet tooth, and so fruit is like high up there on my
Yeah.
list. We love berries in our family. I love pineapple, even on pizza. I know some
Yep.
people don't like that, but I am definitely a pineapple on pizza kind of person. Um, I also like trying new fruits. So we like pomelo here. We like to try some different fruits sometimes, and that's something we involve in Girl Guides for our girls to try some new foods. So we definitely like the pomelo type. It's like an orange and a like a grapefruit or lemon. So you got
Oh,
it's a very interesting fruit and it's very good.
I'll
Yeah,
have to look that up. Yeah. Okay, cool.
pomelo.
And I'm very cool. I also, interestingly enough, was never a big pineapple on pizza person, but within the last year, I think I've come to see the light, and I think I'm a little bit transitioning. So I can get
Awesome.
behind that. I love it. So Heather, first of all, that was great. I think it was a great conversation just to chat about obviously getting involved with YACC. I think you do have a very genuinely unique experience with cancer, and the fact that you're able to bring a lot to the table today, I think a lot of people will appreciate. So thank you for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Stay tuned next week. Have a great, as I mentioned, morning, afternoon, evening, and we will catch up with everybody soon. Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.